today, but before we get to that, we have a couple of other business items. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we go to item 2 first, which is regarding that. It'll take a long time to get the money.
The federal government's getting better at releasing our money. The state tends to take a lot of
I know most of your work was done by mutual aid contracts that you had. Didn't you have some other contracts that you used?
We utilize the roads contract, that we have a contract with them, that we keep roads typically year round. And we utilize our asphalt contracts. We have a mutual aid agreement to bring other crews in. We have to pay the, whatever rate that we made out of the rule.
Yeah, well, you negotiate all the contracts.
We negotiated the asphalt and the roads contract up front. When we initiate mutual aid, essentially it's just, they have a mutual aid contract.
And that's required.
We have the same if we were to work for another entity.
I'll let JG tell you, you guys worked a lot of hours.
Yeah, we had several hours, before the storm, we worked a lot of hours on Wednesday and Thursday, but then crews worked 16 hours and some around the clock on Friday, and most of the day, about 12 to 16 hours on Saturday. So a lot of follow-up on Sunday the rest of the day. They did a great job. And everybody was safe and up and safe.
All right, we need a motion to approve this beyond our authority.
Motion approved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, the next item we have is our ongoing discussion about disinfection of the water system. And we had agreed last month to table this. The first thing I wanted to show you was a document that's been put together by Chief Mitchell and his staff. The chief's here today. Thanks for coming. And I thought it might be, this document shows the evacuation radiuses around the cabin plant where there to be a release. And you can see it's pretty similar to the document that HDR put together.
I would like to say something. This is a document for an instantaneous release. No wind, flat ground. No contours of the land's been taken into account. No time release effect taken into account. This is the same, basically the same numbers that I've got in this document right here, which says that it's 8,400 feet to the middle school. That's approximately 2 miles. 4,200 feet to the hospital and 1,300 feet to Elmer Smith. Now, what this shows you is if the ground was flat, if we had a release, and chlorine does not create a hemispherical cloud when it releases. It seeks low ground. Based on our topography, the effect would be much less, as most of it would flow in and through the channel of the power. So it seeks low ground. So as you look at this, this is not really 100% representative of what would have the event that takes place.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, whatever the wind conditions were at the time.
Irrespective of the wind, if the wind was blowing the wrong way, it's still going to seek and lay on the ground and blanket and seek the lowest point
I know some of the other concerns that we brought up before this on reasons why elimination of chlorine within our community is the transportation issues. That material comes by truck, and that truck could be in an accident when the delivery. Now, we have done everything we can to mitigate time of day when that's actually occurring to eliminate that, reduce that risk. But just having chlorine moving through the community can also impose risks.
But Terry, chlorine moves through the community on a regular basis, including the railroad tracks adjacent to the hospital. I spent a good time researching this and the risk. And the risk indicated that everybody got excited about started back with a attack by terrorists in Iraq, and where they took a 15-ton tanker truck, strapped explosives to it, and blew it up. Well, that was about the same time as 9/11, and so the Homeland Security and the news media and everything jumped on this chlorine bandwagon, so to speak, and created a big news item. Now, we talk about, and I spent, and I gave you one, and the commissioners all had one, a good bit of time exploring the risk factor as it relates to the community and to the employees. It was, and I found that the risk for chlorine gas is there are many, many chemicals in Owensboro that share way more risk than chlorine gas. That's going to keep such a small quantity in cylinders at 150 pounds. I mean, 2,000 pounds. The only theft of that in one time, somebody stole 350 pounds of cylinders. I was going to try to admit wrong. I mean, how do you steal a 3,600 pound steel cylinder, cart it away, and then how you go, the worst thing to do is crack it open. But this depicts an instantaneous release, which with those cylinders, if you punch it, it will not explode. It's going to leak out. So that picture of what could be expected is an idealized thing. Somehow you can turn loose 2,000 pounds of chlorine instantaneously. It is not possible the way we handle chlorine. You run into it with a lift truck, if you could puncture it with a lift truck, you would lose half a cylinder, and you'd have to hem it up against the wall. I mean, the wall's that container, as they said, don't use some of its container. It's very thick. They're made to fall off a tractor truck and not rupture. So,
Yeah, I think we've been over it.
well, we've been over this, but we're just picking on something that's not accurate.
Can we ask, Chief, can I ask Chief a question?
Sure. That's why he's here.
Steve, if, of all, Ted mentioned this, of all of the hazardous material that most in Owensboro on a daily basis, railroad, barge, and truck, what percent would the chlorine OU make up in that time?
We did a survey about 3 years ago in the city of everything that moves through, and that's by barge, rail, and truck. And that document came back, it's a little over an inch thick of different hazardous materials that run through. And of course, chlorine is just one line within that, 1 inch document.
So,
I mean, so it's a low percentage.
yeah, less than 0.5%.
Right.
Right, but from my perspective, Commissioner, it's the only one that we control.
But, so I guess.
We don't control any of the others.
But, I mean, you've been a public servant and doing emergency management your whole career.
Yes.
This is what you do. Of all the risk and the stuff you deal with daily basis, how high of a priority would you place on your concern for chlorine and OMU?
Chlorine, probably our biggest concern in the community is actually ammonia right now, because there is a lot of refrigerated ammonia in town, and it actually has a farther evacuation radius. Chlorine, we're not as concerned about the site as we are as the transportation that goes through, and that would be similar to just any material that goes through town.
So all you have to worry about, this isn't a really high priority.
Chlorine, there's a couple others in town that, I don't really want to mention, that are fixed facilities as well that would rate higher.
One thing we need to clarify is, we are required by the risk management plan to do an off-site consequence analysis, and that is a model that takes into account topography, meteorological conditions, all the things that you said probably correctly. This doesn't take into account. We don't publicize that, but the distance to the toxic endpoint from our model that takes into account all those things is 1.3 miles.
What did they define as toxic?
It's
There's
about
a range of 3 to 5 parts per million, where, if you're under 4 parts per million, is it going to be a problem? It is for exposure.
it's what
Over 1 hour.
USDA and OSHA define as toxic. I don't know the number. It's like around 10 ppm. Chlorine at 30 ppm is immediately dangerous to life.
Right.
That's not
Actually,
very
10
much.
is. But, that the circle and the distances I was talking about was 4 ppm at, what did I have here? I had a distance to the worst place, the middle school is 8,400 feet. That's less than 2 miles. The hospital is 4,200 feet. That's less than a mile. And of course, Elmer Smith is 1,300 feet away. We talk about anything that can be released is going to be a problem. You've got anhydrous ammonia at Elmer Smith. There's chlorine in huge volumes traveling around in this area all the time. Because it is used everywhere. And, it's an elemental gas. When you get to elemental gases, it's something that's very much used in much larger volumes. I looked at this. I tried to keep it very open-minded. I was trying to make a study of this that I thought I was looking for what I thought would be the best route to go. So I was looking for the facts, and that's what I did in this papers. I tried to, I read 10 documents. That's just the ones I listed. I don't count the ones I didn't list. And the risk, if this was that big a risk, it might make sense now. But I don't see that it is that big a risk. because it's, there's just not that much of it. And I don't know what they did in their model, whether they released everything you got. They instantaneously released one cylinder, which I imagine they did. That's the only way they can get it.
No.
Well, I haven't seen it. I would have to
I
see
don't know
it.
that we need to get into the details.
But I haven't
It's
seen
based
it.
on a realistic
It's a modern protocol.
So,
So I think, I think staff's position still remains that this is a risk that we control, and we can eliminate this risk in the community if you decide to not go with chlorine.
what I'm trying to do, Terry, here is define what the real risk is.
Okay.
You got a 2.2 circle up there, you got everybody looking at it, and you're saying, if you wanna debate me on this, give me that report, we'll postpone this thing, I'll sit down with that report, and we'll go over it. I mean, I just wanna do what's the best thing.
No, I am not arguing that the risk is not manageable. We all agree that we've operated these facilities for years with chlorine, we've never had problems.
There's never been one death at a water plant in the United States.
Right. But that doesn't mean that the toxic chemical in the community and at a facility that could be eliminated. And what the industry best practice today is to eliminate chlorine when you have an opportunity. That is industry best practice. Every new plant that's being built.
You go back to that best practice, every new plant that's built. There was a time around 1997 or so that this chlorine thing, when it became active, the chemical industry saw an opportunity. So the chemical industry was going to the water treatment plants. I'll take your chlorine, you won't have to deal with this big thing. They thought they were going to have escorts through town to carry chlorine. So other treatment plants jumped on this opportunity with the chemical people, and they came in, put the equipment in, everything to sell them bleach. And it was a cash cow for the chemical industry. It's so much more expensive, and than the chlorine system.
I understand the history, and I would just say that, one of the other largest chlorine users in town is RWRA. They switched to hypochlorite many years ago.
And I'm not here to debate RWRA's decision.
I'm not either.
I don't know their circumstances. I don't know their chemistry. I don't know what they were trying to do. I don't use other people's examples as to why they switched. I'm trying to figure out why OMU switched. Right. They're going to switch from something else to ultraviolet. So, and they're treating something completely different.
I think one of the other questions that has came up, if you'll go to the next slide, is the question of cost. And, we had HDR in here last month. Not that one. Yeah. And I think based on questions I received from the commission, we've looked at the cost. And what is the actual annual operating cost? It's about $66,800 per year over the first 10 years. So that's the annual increase in operating and fixed costs. Okay, if we go to hypochlorite. What's that translate into? And by the way, that fixed cost includes the cost of debt and interest associated with the installation of the equipment necessary to continue to use chlorine versus the equipment necessary to put in hypochlorite. So the cost to the average OMU residential customer is about 6.5 cents per month, 80 cents a year, and since that residential customers consume about 25% of the water we produce, the rest of it would be borne by the districts and our large industrial and commercial customers, and the cost to them is 1/10.5 cent per 1,000 gallons. So it's a relatively low cost to get rid of a risk that we could get rid of. Now, the question for you is that kind of a return that kind of cost to our customers worth reducing their rates. And everybody's got their opinion about that, and that's kind of what we need to decide.
And also my opinion on that cost.
Yeah, and you know, trust me, we've gone back and scoured through the costs again based on some of the comments you made, Commissioner, last month, and we're comfortable with the costs, the capital costs, they're in the estimate are the correct capital costs.
This is the other plant operators I've talked to, and other utilities that I question those.
Wasn't there a question too last meeting about the taste of the water or that sort of thing? Is that, have you investigated that any further?
We have yet to find anyone who has made a conversion that has a noticeable change in taste from all the research that we did. You know, the other issue that was brought up last month was, what about, we have a large customer that uses a lot of water for a product they produce, and what would the impact be? We approached the customer about this, we've known all along, we're anticipating making some changes, and they did not have time to meet with us prior to this meeting. I think there's a meeting scheduled for next week with that customer, but part of their process, their biggest issue is pH control. And whichever way we go here, whether it's chlorine or hypochlorite, the new plant will allow us to better control pH and help that customer's water quality.
Well, I met with that customer, and pH is not the only. They're bringing in their top chemist and process person next Thursday to discuss it. Right now, where they make other products to compare it to the taste of products made in Owensboro, they say there's a contention. I met with them for a good time as a commissioner. They're also one of my clients, but I presume they call me because they're comfortable with me. And pH was an issue. I said the pH was high. Owensboro's water, according to Terry, he said it's running around 84, 85. That is the upper level of the EPA standard pH for this. So if it gets above that, which they say it is, and we don't know that's for sure. You know, Terry indicated that they've had trouble with some of their pH monitoring equipment. But that can probably be get down the bottom of it because their material that they send out is like 5. So they have to adjust that pH with their process and chemistry to get where it needs to be marketed. They've invited me to that meeting next Thursday. I intend to go. I intend to charge that client because they asked me to. They are very concerned. They are not just about pH. They're concerned about all components of it. But they had nobody on staff that they felt process and logical. You know, if they say it's okay, it's okay. You know, if you got, they make it nice. That's something else I think that until that meeting takes place, as well as the customers, maybe it's a reason to postpone this decision.
Well, to me, it really comes down to, right now, we have a simple process of disinfecting that's very effective, very cost efficient, uses a high quality water. You're asking us to change to something that's more costly, harder to maintain, with potential to impact on the water. So why would we do that? So you would tell me chlorine's unsafe. Well, statistics from the industry do not support that. Actually, there's more incidents and injuries from hypochlorite than there is chlorine. We talk about terrorism. That's what Brent told us last week, the bad guy, the bad actors. Well, Ted's already told that. Terrorism is about impacting the most casualties the easiest way. They found out there's a lot simpler, more effective ways to kill mass people than trying to mess with chlorine. And then you've got this release that's going, instead of cloud, that's going to into the mud. Well, does that potential exist? Yeah, I'll grant you that. But I asked you, and I told you before, Terry, what would be the potential reduction in deaths and injuries if we had a policy that all of our electrical distribution systems are underground? It'd be many, many more risk involved in that than things. So why don't we do that? Well, we don't, because that would be millions of dollars that the ratepayers of that resort would be unacceptable. So what do? We manage the risk. And frankly, y'all do it very well. This is no different. Granted, the numbers are bigger, but it's the same principle. We're well equipped to manage the very low risk that exists with that port. And to me, I've looked at this a lot in the last 2 weeks. I've reading articles and reports, and I've talked to operators from other industries that are doing this, and I'm more convinced that ever chlorine gas in there.
Well, I certainly appreciate you guys taking the time to do your own research on this. I think as professionals in this business, we're still advising you to not use chlorine, to move away from chlorine to sodium hypochlorite. And unless there's any further discussion, Mr. Chairman, you can take a motion, or you can, whatever you want to do. There is a motion that we put together last meeting, which was to accept our recommendation. You can choose to change the motion, you can choose to table this issue, you can do whatever.
I want to make an alternate. We need a decision on the use of chlorine and postpone the actual bleeding of the smallest supply, large industrial customers to give a determination of what they think may or may not be impacted.
Second. I don't know, that's not too sure. Well, I'll second it, so we can discuss it.
So did you get that?
And I don't know that we need to postpone with that. I mean, regardless if this customer has issues that maybe, I think our staff's going to work with that customer to resolve those issues wherever we are, wherever direction we go. And that's just my, I mean, I think we're going
Their statement, depending on how this goes, they have to have water at a certain point. Whatever they get after the change may or may not require that they put in their own water treatments. They have a water treatment system now that I installed 10 years ago. It softens the water more. So it's not something that they couldn't do. I just think that everybody needs to know this industry would have to do it. It's possible. I'm not saying.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that there's, out of 5 of us, it's pretty obvious how 2 people feel. And you pick up with 2. You think that is, but I think we ought to go ahead and do something myself.
I withdraw my motion.
And you know, I first read about all this, and I first got into it, I guess, thanks to Tony. He sent me several nice articles to read, and then Ted sent me some great articles to read, and I read all that. I probably read more articles on chlorine in the last couple of weeks, like all of us have, I guess, than I ever thought I would ever read about chlorine. And it's been quite, enlightening, to be honest with you. The cost issue was a big one for me. And I got thinking, last time they said it's $50,000, now it's $66,000, but $57,000, that's $137 a day, and now it's $183 a day or something like that. If you just look at it, how much it's going to cost to put a new per day. I read this by a couple of friends of mine that are always asking me about how come your rates are so high? What can you do to lower your rates? And one of them said, that's not very much to consider OMU's budget every year. I thought, well, that's interesting that they would say that. But I guess what really made me change my mind about the whole deal is what Ted sent me, and it's in his little note here that says that it's the word fatal. He said it could be fatal after just a few breaths within 1,800 feet, and it's 1,300 feet to Elmer Smith. Well, we got people working at Elmer Smith, and the word fatal is just to a physician, it's just unacceptable in any way, shape, or form. And so the word fatal is going to make me vote to accept the administration's recommendation because of the word fatal. I know it's not likely to happen, but for a few cents a day for each ratepayer, $183 a day, you know, that word is just unacceptable. So that would be how I vote.
I withdraw my motion.
Therefore, I will make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration.
So I have a second. Are we ready to vote, or is there more discussion? All those in favor of the recommendation of staff say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 3-2.
The last item that we have today in the work session is our annual regulatory update. Required under our governance policies to provide you with a regulatory update each year on the pending regulations that could impact OMU. And we'll start off with Tim. Because he is the lead
Regulatory compliance update. One of our largest risks here in the electric department is associated with our adherence to the North American Electric Reliability Corporation standards. OMU currently is required department-wide and company-wide of 76 electric standards, 586 requirements. If you look across there, the numbers don't add up, but you know, you might have one that's a standard for a GO and a GLB and a PO, but nevertheless, we have to administer those 586 requirements. If found non-compliant by CERC, we could face a penalty up to $1 million a day for every violation that occurs. Now, OMU being a relatively low participant in the bulk electric system, I doubt we would ever see that, but it is a definable charge that could be assessed to OMU. I am pleased to bring to you today that OMU had an audit with CERC. It began last November and concluded in the middle of February with an on-site visit with the organization. And they had no findings of non-compliance during the 2016 audit. And just shortly right after that, we had a follow-up of a critical infrastructure protection audit. It was a self-guided certification. Essentially, we just concluded this audit through the portal and a lot of phone conversations. And once again, there were no findings of non-compliance. So we are very pleased with that audit. It takes a lot of time to have that paperwork put together, present the evidence. They're very thorough, and I'm pleased with the staff that we were able to come through that audit with no findings. Pending regulations that are ongoing deal with, at the bottom, NERC is trying to consolidate some of these standards to make them more efficient and more user-friendly. And those are the bottom two, EOP1 and TLP3. As always, there's a critical infrastructure protection. We're in version 5. We are going to be designated as a small entity, but there's still a lot of procedures and policies that will need to be put in place by April 1 of next year to remain compliant in that standard. And then the ones that are considered modeling, there is a great emphasis on the modeling of the bulk electric system infrastructure. And it has to deal with all of the changes that the bulk electric system is facing in these days. Changes in resource and the renewable energy that's being brought into the system. So there is a great emphasis on design criteria and how your system is actually performing versus the modeling. And so with all those three that are listed, Mod 23, 20, 31, and 33, there's a tremendous amount of data that we're having to work with. Kevin's staff's doing a great job of providing a lot of that data to the modeling with LG and EKU and the industry. And we are continuously keeping up our transmission models and changes and evaluating those kind of things. Things that are kind of out in the forefront are there's a great emphasis being placed on geomagnetic disturbances. OMU has a small impact associated with that. And then once again, coordination of generating unit plant capabilities and real-time monitoring. Real-time monitoring is going to be much more, there's going to be higher requirements for that and being able to keep up with the changes in generation as the resource mixes. In association with that, FERC Order 1000 was finalized. I've been presenting this to you for the last 2 or 3 years. However, LG&E was approved along with Southern Company and OVEC to form the SERTP, that's the Southern Region Transportation Planning Group. And it's very important. This is a final rule by the Commission that allows for electric transmission planning and cost allocation across the different companies. There's a certain goal of criteria that's going to have to be met, and they put this in place with all the potential transmission expansion that could be occurring not only in the United States, but over the Southeast region. So we continually monitor that, and we're part of the stakeholders, and those are the member companies. So essentially, it's everybody in the Southeast with the exception of Florida. And finally, on water, all of our operators kept their certifications. Very important as they test water, especially when we have leaks. And we were 100% compliant with our consumer confidence report, which production has a lot involved in that report also. And we were able to do it all through the electronic delivery option, which was presented just all in all, I'm very pleased with where we are. I did fail to mention on one slide that EPA was here in September timeframe last year, and they audited our books of how we handle oil spills and how our manifests were working as far as transporting oil and transformers and disposing of them properly, and all things were found well in that audit also. So very pleased with this year's audit process. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thanks, David.
I'll stand over here. So, well, I can't, because I can't see the screen from the glare, so I'll move back over here. I don't have this memorized. So on the air side, as you guys know, production, especially on the power side, we have a multitude of rules and regulations to comply with. So our compliance update is fairly long, but hopefully it's fairly uneventful. So we are in compliance with all these different air requirements. Our SO2 and NOx emissions and the different state emissions for opacity and particulate. We do monitoring and testing continuously, continuous monitoring. We stack testing at least once a year. We're in compliance with all that. We have a Title V permit that covers all those things and requires us to be in compliance, and it has its own set of reporting and certification requirements, and we're in compliance with all of its requirements. The Title V permit is fairly long and exhaustive, but it does lay out how we comply with all those above. Risk management plan we've talked a lot about with respect to chlorine. The risk management plan for Cabin Plant and Elmer Smith, because they're a contiguous property, is one RMP that covers both the chlorine gas and the ammonia. And we're required to do lots of updates to that, and we're in compliance with all its requirements. A couple of details we talked about last year. The mercury and air toxic standards rule went into effect for us. It requires us to put the controls in, the actual things that are going to reduce mercury by April 16th of 2016. All that stuff is in, and as you recall, we have to do approximately a 90% reduction of mercury. We are putting out, we're talking about mercury that we're measuring in the parts per trillion category, and we're reducing from ballpark numbers 300 pounds of mercury to 30 pounds of mercury a year. So we met everything else. We count them in tons, and mercury we count them in pounds. Our compliance plan, just as a little bit refresher, we added all the equipment we've got a plethora of mercury controls at the plant. We've got carbon and lime we inject into the ductwork of Unit 2. We inject an additive into the scrubber to help capture all the mercury that comes through. We also put additives on coal for both units. All this is to help get the mercury in a format where the scrubber, where it's either taken out with the carbon or the scrubber can capture it. So it's a very complicated system. It's been up and running. We have been reducing mercury. The next step is we have a testing that's required within 6 months of that April 16th the date. We're going to do ours next week after next, August 15th and 16th, and that will be our initial compliance certification. It'll also be the test that certifies our monitoring system that it is in compliance with EPA's requirements. Again, we've had some issues, some growing pains with the monitoring system, and we're trying to measure parts per trillion of mercury in the stack that you see at the plant, and it's a challenge. But we've got those things addressed. We are actually doing some preliminary testing today in advance of when the test crew comes in, and the state folks will be on site to verify that next week. So everything's going very well with that. Still on the power side, we do have water limits. We have a water permit, Kentucky Pollution Discharge Elimination System. We're in compliance with that. It's a 5-year permit. We also have SPCC, spill prevention controls and countermeasures. A lot of requirements at the plant for that. We have a lot of things that trigger those requirements. And then on the waste side, coal combustion residuals. That's a new rule that last year was on the horizon. It went into effect, and for us, the first phase of that, if you will, in October of this year, of 15, and required us to, as we talked about last year, change how we manage our byproducts, our scrubber, gypsum, bottom ash, fly ash, and boiler slag. So that really limited the beneficial uses that we could do with that. So now, as you guys know, you approved, we have a contract with the Davis County landfill. We haven't taken any material to the landfill yet, but it's our highest cost option. We are getting a trucking contract together, and we will be moving some material there to get that process rolling, but we're still trying to minimize that. We do have a very good cost-effective agreement with Peabody that we're backhauling some ash to the active mine site, which is still allowed by the rules. And then we are making our gypsum, that's for wallboard. We've been very fortunate in that the housing construction market has come back a little bit, and we're actually all the gypsum we've been able to manufacture has been taken by U.S. Gypsum into that market. So that's a good thing. So that really minimizes our costs on that. And then we recycle all of our used oil and lubricants. This is a slide that Terry wanted me to mention. It's been in the last 3 or 4 years, just to give you an idea of what our compliance costs are on the power side. Annual permitting fees, emission allowances, monitoring and sampling and reporting costs totals about $1.2 million. A little over half of that is our annual emissions fee we pay to the state of Kentucky. And this year we're budgeting about $700,000 for that. Reagents. This number has taken a jump up as we talked about the emission control reagents for mercury are very expensive. $5.9 million. That's the carbon, the lime, those chemicals we put into the scrubber, as well as the limestone we use for the scrubber. Byproduct management, these are our costs to manage these materials off-site, about $3 million. Maintenance we do on all this equipment is about $2.7 million, and then this year we had a little bit of capital expenditure, not much, about $300,000. So if you total all that up, just to give you some perspective, that's about 18% of our power production O&M budget for fiscal 17, including coal. Of course, coal is our #1 expenditure. If you take coal out of the picture, it's a little over 40% of our O&M budget that goes for environmental compliance.
Of course, it'll be a lot less.
It'll be a lot less, and there's no outages this year, so it'll be a lot less than an outage year. But it is a good chunk of what we do. On the water side, the water's a little bit simpler. There are a lot of rules and regulations. Primary drinking water standards, we are in compliance with those. Secondary drinking water regulations we mentioned, those are not required. We're not required to meet that pH limit, for example, in the secondaries. Those are guidelines. We've had discussions with the state about those to make sure they're happy with our treatment system. Our operators all maintain their certification. We are a Class 4 system. That's the next to the largest class of treatment operator. And all of our operators are certified. They maintain that. We do have a KPDS permit on the water side for the discharge from the sludge lagoons out don't know what that road is called anymore, but out there by the old bypass. We're in compliance with that permit. Talked about the RMP, we also have groundwater protection plans for all our facilities that we're in compliance.
Do a lot of reporting, a lot of this.
We do a lot of reporting. A lot of this is we report monthly to the state. A whole bunch of data for our water treatment system, and we're in compliance with all those reports. Some of that is monthly, some of those down at the bottom are VOCs. They're annually or every 3 years. And then Tim mentioned our consumer confidence report. That's our annual requirement. We do now have approval to do that electronically on our website. You can go see the current one. You can see previous years on the website.
Some of the pending regulations that are...
Some of the pending regulations that are things that are coming at us. The coal combustion residuals rule still has some requirements that are going to affect us. That we are in this year's budget. We are in the initial stages of getting a groundwater monitoring system in place around the ash ponds at the plant. That's required by October of 2017. We have to take sampling. Results of that sampling then may indicate what the rule requires for us to do with the groundwater, with the ash pond. Closure of that ash pond is in the future. It's just a matter of when, based on what triggers we hit in the rule. The Kentucky Division of Waste Management is developing state CCR rules. As you recall, the federal CCR rule is self-implementing, which means there is no entity that enforces the requirements or provides guidance and feedback. They put the rules out there and they said you got to comply with them. The way that compliance is enforced is through citizen lawsuits. We put all our information that's required on our website. Citizens can look at that. Kentucky is looking at developing state regulations that will basically reference or mirror the federal regs, so that we will have a state-issued permit, which will provide us some level of comfort that if we do have an issue, we will have the state who has signed off on it. And a big thing that Kentucky is also looking at is when they do a new permitting program, is to get some permitting and operating fees out of us. So there'll be additional CCR fees when that comes along. We talk more about the fees sometimes than we do about the nuts and bolts. So that's coming. They're thinking of trying to get those rules in by the end of calendar 16, and we'll see how that goes.
The effluent limitation guidelines.
The effluent limitation guidelines. This rule was final in the end of 2015.
In summary, requires
that we no longer are able to use water to transport, convey ash materials. That's one of the big deals of it. Right now, we use water to sluice ash out into the ash pond. That will be eliminated when this rule goes into effect. So it eliminates that wet handling. It also requires treatment of our FGD blowdown stream, which right now goes through our ash pond system. We settle the materials out and discharge to the river under an APDS permit. This rule will require a chemical and physical treatment process, or a chemical and biological treatment process on that. As you recall, we talked about last year, we estimate about $12 million for compliance with this, about $25 million for CCR, $37 million total. One good thing about both these rules is EPA tried to get the timelines to line up. Really, the ultimate end date for both these CCR and ELG is complying by 2023. So we have been meeting with the state, and the implementation is through the KPDS permit.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Terry, this is part of the model that's used as far as funding is concerned, these costs into the closure. If this were to go away, the units, if this were to go away, it would alter that closure date.
It is the main driver of our decision as to when we should cease operating on the one. So we don't expect these to go away. They are final rules. The one that we do think could go away, probably not a high likelihood, is the clean power plant rules, which we don't know what the cost of implementing those are. But these rules in and of themselves have forced us to recommend a closure date for unit 1 to 2019. And we're still evaluating what we're doing.
You're headed right where I was headed. Bottom line is, if we continue with coal, we'll have to comply with these rules no later than 2023. There'll be a compliance timeline put in our next Title V, or our next KPES permit that will give us a compliance timeline. What we're working with the state on is, because we know we're doing the modeling, the RP process, to say, okay, if we come out and the decision is made that we're going to shut Unit 1 down, or Unit 2, or convert to natural gas before 2023, not to require we make this investment unnecessary. And they've been understanding we're not the only utility. They said we've heard that a lot. We're not the only utility that are making this pitch. They have some flexibility. So what they want from us is as we get IRP results, to come back and tell them what are your options and how do they work with our compliance timeline. And that's what we're working with. Because we do not want to spend any of that money if we don't have to, because, you know, if they put an arbitrary, or if they put us a compliance date, let's say of 2020, and we decided we were going to shut down or convert to natural gas in 2021, but we can work with them on that, and they've been so far understanding. Now, we haven't got to the details yet. But.
Yeah, I will say that the current administration seems to have a much more open perspective on the impact of ratepayers of these regulations and the need to integrate that with retirement dates. And they also recognize the Clean Power Plan, when that case gets settled by the Supreme Court, we'll have another overlay on top of this. And what the administration has said is, we don't want to unnecessarily burden ratepayers with compliance costs that ultimately will not be necessary if a unit is shut down.
I have a question for you. Sure. Before you get any further, the coal combustion residuals, do we take those and we dump them at Peabody, or we used to take them up to the...
We don't take them there anymore.
But do they still belong to us?
Yes.
So if something happened in 20 years ago, I said, well, CCRs...
Generally speaking, the generator is kind of called cradle to grave. The generator owns those materials in perpetuity.
Even though we dump them somewhere else.
Right.
They still... Okay. And we pay that to dump somewhere else.
Yes. You know, just a little ancient history. We got into a one of these suits back in the early 90s. Pat recalls we had taken some asbestos to a permitted legal landfill, and we follow all the rules. But over time, they had some releases from that landfill. It had nothing to do with asbestos. It was heavy metals. But we got involved under the Superfund law as a potentially responsible party just because we had taken some material that we were on their inventory list. So that can happen.
Yeah, you never lose the liability associated with waste. Never.
I don't know if what we paid them to take it would allow them to take the
You can
responsibility.
contractually, and I'm not a lawyer, but this is an environmental engineer, and many, many years ago, I used to do a lot of Superfund related activity, even though it may say in a contract that they indemnify you against future liability. That's not worth the paper it's printed on, because when that's federal laws, they come back under joint and several liability.
In many of these cases, the actual facility is bankrupt, and they come back to where they perceive the deep pockets are.
You could attempt to require your facility to do that, but the simple answer is no. And that creates a huge problem, because who's to say that your material caused groundwater contamination versus someone else?
Yeah.
You said about 18% of our cost is tied up in the chemicals and the reagents and all. What would that be if we were with natural gas instead of coal?
Zero.
Zero?
Well, there are compliance costs, but that $5.9 million I showed you, that's all to treat the coal. If you go to natural gas, there are very few of those costs that remain. You still have to have permitting costs and things like that, but all those emissions that we have now are really
Chemical reagents and all that.
that's all really to treat the cost, the result of burning cost.
There
There's a
are-
CCR, there's no CCR on gas.
I mean, there are some operations costs. Nitrogen oxide emissions out of gas-fired generation is a regulated unit. And depending on the age of the unit, you may be required to put in very similar technology to what we have on the SCRs, selective catalytic reduction. And if you do, then you have to buy some more and you have to put some of them catalyzed.
It would be some.
There'll be some, but there's so much less nitrogen in the fuel that the amount you use is much.
Yeah, it's minuscule compared to what we have.
Not done with the regulations yet?
Not done with the regulations yet. The 316B rule, this regulates, as you recall, cooling water intake structures, prevents damage to the aquatic species of fish from getting either impinged on the screens or entrained and carried through the system. That, again, will be implemented in our next permit renewal, which is scheduled to happen in the next year or so. Same story. We're going to try to avoid any 316B expenditure on Unit 1 because our current plan is to shut down in 2019, and then Unit 2 will be contingent upon what happens with Unit 2. Now, if we switch to natural gas, we'll still have to do 316B because we'll still be using the water intake structure.
Terry mentioned the clean power plan.
Terry mentioned the Clean Power Plan. Basically, what's going on now is it's at the Supreme Court. They stayed the rule. They had an oral argument scheduled for the summer. They pushed it back to the fall. Kentucky was at a meeting with them, and what they said is on Clean Power Plan, they are pencils down. They're not doing anything on the Clean Power Plan until there's a court ruling. So they're just waiting to see what happens. With this administration, it's just put it on the back burner.
Other states are continuing to move forward with an article today about states requesting EPA move deadlines for certain aspects of chlorine reduction components of the So Kentucky's, I think, generally because of budget considerations, has stopped working. Other states continue to wait.
I have a question. I was looking at that 5.9 for reagents, and you mentioned the total figure. I had that in my mind trying to figure out what the cost per pound.
It's like the same thing.
It's like the same thing
calculated
as
that
gold.
number.
But
Right.
what was that total number again? It was after 5.9 and all the other numbers added together?
About 13 million.
13 million. If we had no cost of 13 million, if we enter into an agreement with the Kentucky group there, they're all still generating coal, right?
Well, the bulk of their base prior to 2022 will be.
So basically, we have to pay that somewhere else.
About that power. We remember with.
I understand. That you get where I'm going here in just a minute. If we're paying $13 million a year over 10 years, what would the gas plant cost to put in Owensboro? That Owensboro alone would have control of the cost to generate Owensboro's needs and needs. If we looked into that.
We have looked at it at a high level what the cost would be, and to meet our needs, would be a single combined cycle unit, and because of what we term shaft risk, the fact that you only have one shaft that's spinning. Right now we have two. If the unit goes down, we have another one backing up, and stuff does happen.
Shaft risk.
But the problem is.
Instead of what big.
The problem is that the cost for a single unit at that small size is prohibitive relative to going in as maybe an equity owner on a nearby generating unit that's much larger that can gain orders of magnitude gains in economy.
Since y'all have done that, just out of curiosity, to satisfy my own math.
One more regulatory change on the power side. Our NOx, the rule that regulates NOx and SO2 emissions, the federal rule is called the Clean Cross States Air Pollution Rule, or CASPR. It has a phase 2 that begins in calendar 2017 that will ratchet down our allowance allocation NOx by about 10%, and SO2 is probably approximately a 57% reduction. Fortunately for us, we have plenty of headroom with the scrubber. That's not a concern for us. We have a lot of excess allowances. That SO2 allowance market is pretty depressed, so they're not worth a lot. But when that comes, we will not be significantly affected by that reduction to the SO2. Looks like a big
Water
one.
production is a little bit.
Water production is a little bit simpler. They are revising the lead and copper rule. The US EPA is. That's gotten a lot of attention since the Flint, Michigan issue. They've got some proposed revisions to that. A lot of what that looks like it's going to be are on sampling and reporting, because things that are get dropped through the cracks in Flint, as well as the lead and copper rule has different requirements for different size utilities, and they're looking at some of that. But we don't think it's going to materially affect us. It might require us to do more sampling, more testing, but we don't have we don't have a proposed rule yet.
Yeah, one thing about lead and copper, this is an issue that the state has formed an advisory group that consists of just a few folks from municipal water supply systems. It's chaired by the former CEO of Blue Water, and they're looking at a lot of things around lead. Now, the one thing about these lead and copper rules that we have to be very careful about is that at the federal level, where you sample that, and what's in the regulation could be at the tap in a home. And at the tap in a home, it could be that all the piping in the home is galvanized piping with lead soldered joints and picks up lead as it goes through the home. We're producing copper lead soldered joints. Well, there's a lot of actually solid lead joint and set lead pipe. We don't think there's much here in Omaha. We have been doing research, but we have to watch these rules very closely, because we could produce water with 0 copper or lead in it, and if we're sampling it at a home faucet and it has copper and lead, that could impose limitations on us and force us to make changes, force our customers to make changes. We just have to be very, very cautious. There's a lot of implications.
We do a fair amount of non-permit, non-rule required sampling just to ourselves and on our system, and we don't see any lead and copper.
I think this is a problem, but if the EPA or the state comes out with a rule that says you must identify every piece of lead in your system and put a remediation plan in place to remove it all, that would have a big impact on us.
We can eliminate that.
When we go into an area to do work, if we find what's called lead or
We have these service connections that generally connect from a larger main to a smaller main, or from our main to the customer's, to our side of the customer's meter. A lot of those are lead. Now, we've been since the 90s, early 90s. Every time we come across one of those, we replace it. So a lot of them have already been replaced. So we do have that lead in the system.
And we replaced about 300 to 400 services.
So we're working through the systems.
So we're inventorying all that.
We talked to a lot of plumbers to try to identify target areas, because the plumbers would know where these would be. And we're trying to develop an inventory so we have an idea if there are any areas in the city where we need to focus on, we'll know where they are.
And we actually have a team working on that. What's copper is a neurotoxin.
Gastrointestinal distress,
Yes.
long-term exposure to liver and kidney damage.
So as I mentioned, we're keeping this permit renewal. We've been waiting to renew it since 2004. It expired 2006. We've been operating on that permit as every power plant in the state except with a couple of exceptions. Now they're working on those because now they have the direction from EPA on these rules I mentioned. We expect a renewal probably by the end of 2017. And then, of course, the Clean Power Plan is in the courts. The cabin upgrade permitting, we're probably a few weeks away from having initial discussions with the state, laying out what our plan is for cabin and getting all those permits moving forward.
All right. The new goal on the public health EPA thing for lead is 0.
Right, they said there's no safe level of lead.
There's no safe level of lead.
Yes.
All right. This is Dana Wilson, by the way, and she's pinch hitting for Michael today. Dana is our manager of HR and safety.
Yes. Good afternoon. So I'm going to go over the compliance update in Michael's areas. So I'll start with the safety and health under OSHA. So there is things coming down January 1st on improving the tracking of injuries and illnesses, post-accident drug testing, and anti-retaliation. I'll go into some more details here the next few slides. And then under human resources, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the exempt versus non-exempt is finally coming down as well, December 1st. And then, of course, the ongoing Cadillac tax under the ACA. So, under the improved tracking, as OSHA deems it, effective January 1st, the only real change that will happen, because we're so used to logging all the injury and illnesses electronically on a very simple Excel spreadsheet per OSHA, but now we're going to have to actually, in addition to that, take the injury and illnesses and log it into their system that they don't have developed yet. It's going to go in effect January 1st. They've got actually two different requirements, one for employers 50 to 249, but that's what we fall into, and then beyond that. They don't have their infrastructure built up yet to make this happen. So a lot of employers wonder how this is going to affect them come January 1st. Post-accident drug screening. This is what they're calling a lot of employers and attorneys that are doing some webinars on this is the sleeper provision of this improved record keeping. They're lumping it underneath the record keeping ruling is post-accident and alcohol drug testing. So right now, most employers have a blanket post-accident drug testing. If you get hurt, you seek outside medical attention, it's automatic, you get a drug test. They're stating now that it shouldn't be so blanket. Some of the examples that are floating out there is that if you have a bee sting or a paper cut that would get infected, those are unlikely circumstances that someone would be under the influence, so you wouldn't drug test them. Someone who might have a fork truck accident that could be fatal or serious bodily injury could be someone who's under the influence. Very subjective, it's going to be very difficult to manage. This part of the ruling goes into effect August 10th. Many employers are not making any movement to meet August 10th because they're waiting. OSHA's not going to enforce until November 1st. And they state they're going to help employers with outreach materials, trainings on how to accomplish this ruling. There's some employers out there and experts that think that some of this might be changed before November 1st. So something we're looking at, because that's currently our policy. You get hurt, you go outside, you get attention, medical attention, and you do a drug test.
So the OMU policy isn't going to change at the moment?
Not at the moment, no. We need to look into how we have to update our drug testing policy, part of our safety policies too, and how do we train our managers and supervisors as well, and our employees. Yeah. So we're waiting for some of that guidance, OSHA's
There's a lot of gray areas in there.
Yes, there is. Yeah. Anti-retaliation. This is another sleeper policy that they're lumping this under the improved tracking of workplace injuries and illnesses, but they're also calling this a sleeper provision. Is that employees must feel free to report injury and illnesses, which that is nothing new under OSHA. Everyone should feel free without feeling like they're being retaliated against. This does prohibit some incentive programs, so that's really the biggest thing that employers are focusing on across the country and locally, because most companies have incentive programs. But if you have incentive programs in there that encourage employees not to report an accident, that will be against this rule. Again, this rule is the same as the post-accident drug test. It is August 10th, which is next week, but they're not going to have enforcements until November 1st. Once again, they're wanting to send out outreach materials, guidance for employers. So there's a lot of buzz and talk about this because a lot of employers have incentive programs that might be connected to rates. Are they safe? Maybe it's broken out by departments. It's not unusual to hear those types of things. So we need to really evaluate our programs when we incentivize employees for working safely, but also make sure we're meeting what OSHA is calling the anti-retaliation protection. Another portion of this.
You said it sounds counterproductive.
That's just.
Another part of this anti-retaliation is the disciplining side of things. They prefer that you're not disciplining employees that for just not stating they're not working carefully. That's too vague of a statement. Really, if they're legitimately breaking a safety rule you have in place, that's when discipline is supported, I guess, by OSHA. And I think that we do a good job at that here. I don't think that's going to be one of our issues here. One of the examples that has been listed is incentive programs. A bonus for a team of employees, if no one is injured over a defined period of time, would be considered incentivizing underreporting. But a bonus for employees participating in a safety committee would be acceptable to OSHA. So participating in actions, doing a safety audit, doing a stop observation, those things would be more the incentive side of things. So it would affect us. So we got to figure out how we're going to interpret it and what some of those guidelines and materials come out from OSHA. So. Fair Labor Standards Act. So this has been talked about for over a couple of years now. Finally, on December 1st, they are implementing the changes to this. It's really focused on the exempt versus non-exempt. It is a very low impact to OMU. We have two positions, exempt positions currently, that we needed to look at. But because of those two people that are in those positions, they are far enough into the wage scale that it doesn't affect that minimum level that the FLSA has set forward. Now, we'll have to be on the watch for that because they plan on upping that salary threshold every couple of years. So we'll have to watch and pay attention to that to make sure those people in those positions progress higher than that and still are performing those duties under the exempt provisions. If we would hire somebody new into that position and we start them at the lower level, we'd have an issue we have to look at. So we're in good shape compared to other employees who have many positions that they'd have to look at and adjust. The Cadillac tax, there is not anything new to report from last year on this. Although I guess maybe a few of the dollars there in the second bullet point, they may have changed a little bit, but there's not really any movement because it has changed a couple of times since they made this announcement a couple of years ago, or a few years ago now. Customer service updates. The House Bill 5, the policy was implemented here in December 2014. The OMU created the incident response team, and it continues to evolve. We are currently in maintenance mode and proceeding forward. Nothing new has been changed there. Under procurement, there's continual monitoring on the horizon, but nothing new. And under the warehouse environmental, there is now a person that is responsible for the compliance and control coordinator of the EPA PCB. Under open records, we continue to monitor Attorney General rulings, so there's nothing new to report there. And that is all of mine. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob gets the he gets the prize for most words crammed onto a single history of PowerPoint. So with that, you have an objective of explaining it in like a minute.
Actually cut a bunch of words out. I was thinking I was going to be brief. So the first one I'm going to report on is the SEPA's dam safety classification, and this began back in February of 2007 when the Corps determined to lower the pool levels at the Wolf Creek and Center Hill projects to reduce the risk of imminent failure due to seepage issues. In March of 2014, the work at Wolf Creek was completed, but the customers of SEPA, which we're one of, is still operating under an interim operating agreement and paying rates that were predicated upon a repayment study that was done in August of 2011. Lo and behold, when they redid the repayment study in January 2015, they determined that it was inadequate funds, which would have resulted in an increase of roughly 32% over the current rates. In May of 2015, proposed rates were published in the Federal Register, and those rates were for a one-year term. Comments were submitted, and in September of 2015, the FERC approved rates for a 5-year term that were determined under provisions of the Dam Safety Act. And what that equates to is a 12% increase versus a 32% increase. So it's an increase, but still could have been a lot worse. The Center Hill project is expected to be completed in late 2018, 2019. The other one here is FERC Order 155, and in June, about a year ago, FERC issued an order to PJM basically saying that their tariff may be unjust and unreasonable because it didn't allow market participants to submit hourly changes to their day-ahead schedules or real-time changes. In November of 2015, PJM proposed revisions to their tariff and operating agreement, and in June of this year, the Commission found that your tariff and operating agreement are unjust and reasonable, and they rejected their compliance filing from November and gave them sort of guidance on where they should head. Part of that guidance was having market participants to submit a fuel cost policy to justify how market participants submit their day-ahead generation offers. And it's really just a security check to make sure that market participants aren't exerting market power, where they're influencing the prices that the market's clear. It's not an issue for OMU because we don't have enough, we're not going to move the needle, but as a market participant, we do need to comply. We were notified on June the 30th from the independent market monitor that we did not have a fuel cost submitted. We had discussions with them and submitted a fuel cost policy on a template that they provided and some supporting data on our cost of production, and we're just waiting for further instructions from them. And that's all I have. Any questions?
No rules about the lemon and red squares on those. That kind of gives me a flutter.
We just can't be all red. All right, last but not least,
It'll be quick. The exciting Gatsby's.
county, my favorite topic.
Yeah.
I actually got questions.
Oh, man, are they boring too.
JT, I'll send you the 80-page descriptions of each one. All right, basically, couple years ago, they came out with the pension GASBs that required us to book the KRS portion attributable to OMU employees on our financial statements. So now they've come out with the post-employment benefit requirement. We have to eventually in 17, standard 75 on the employer side, we'll have to record the liability for the health insurance piece of the KRS payment. So of the in fiscal 16 was we paid 17% was our employer contribution. 13% of that was for pension and 4% was for health insurance. So we'll have to book that liability for the health insurance side. That's what these two new ones are about. 76, this previously the hierarchy of the general accepted accounting principles or GAAP for state and local governments was GASB, and then your GASB bulletins, GASB implementation guides, and then you come on down to other literature, AICPA and FASB and FERC. They've eliminated all the tiers except they have two tiers now, strictly GASB. GASB statements and GASB bulletins and interpretations, and any AICPA literature that they approve or clear. So FASB's already been, and I think it was GASB 62 incorporated all the FASBs, or the majority of them, so no mention of FERC anymore. 77 statement, that really doesn't apply to public power utilities because we don't abate taxes. 78, this is really doesn't apply to OMU because this excludes state and local pension plans. 79, this is for investment pools that are external. If we were to go with other entities, other governmental entities, and pool our cash for investments, we'd have to follow some reporting and disclosure notes on that. And we don't, currently don't do any of that. 80, this is component units. If we were to have a component that we, another business that was a component of OMU that was a private entity, we would have to combine those into our governmental statements is what this is referring to, because the private companies follow FASB, which have some different regulations than the GASB. So that really doesn't apply to us. And then 81, the split interest agreements. If we were to get a large donation and with several other governmental entities, this requires special reporting for how to split the donations and the interest on the donation money. So it really doesn't apply to OMU. But I wanted to list all of them for JT, so you know all the accounting updates. 82, this is basically updating the previous pension GASB that they made 3 technical amendments, which changes specifics in the notes to the audit and the financial statements, and changes a classification for the actuary on their end of the report, and then classification on if we were to pay, say like the general manager's portion of his employee portion of the pension plan, we'd have to follow certain reporting and accounting rules, and we don't do that, so don't have to really mess with this one much. The most important thing is the upcoming exposure drafts. The fiduciary funds really doesn't affect us that much. If we owned our own pension plan, this would apply to us. But the certain asset retirement obligation, this one probably will affect us if we decommission Unit 1. We'll have to set up, recognize the liability, and then any kind of payments we would have going forward on that, and adjust it, the measurement on that liability and expenses each year annually until it's wiped off the books. And then on the leases, that's probably the most affected GASB that's going to come out for OMU, because they're doing away with currently you have a capital lease or you have an operating lease that you expense. So they're going to do away with those 2 types of leases, and they're just going to have a capital lease. Well, where this is going to come in to affect OMU is, according to the APPA webinar, of course this won't come out for another couple of years, but if we have an entitlement share of generation based on a contract, like a power purchase agreement, we'll have to book a capital asset and a liability for that lease. They'll consider that contract a lease, and then so there's going to be all kinds of changes on how to account for those type contracts if we're using somebody else's asset. So before it wasn't looked at as a lease.
This has been an issue in the industry for quite some time. A way for utilities to avoid imputed debt on the balance sheet by entering into a long-term contract with a power producer. That long-term contract was accounted for as an expense item, not debt. Even though it was a 10-year obligation for annual payments, they only booked a 1 year of expense. And that has led the rating agencies to feel that that's not a good indication of the future liabilities of the company, and that's why they're making these changes.
The last item I have is the financial reporting update. In 1999, they came out with GASB 34, which provided the current governmental district-wide or entity-wide statements for your audit. It's totally different than a regular private company's or public company's financials and the way they're reported in the audit. They're looking at revising the financial system to be easier to be read by the general public and to make it quicker and faster for accountants to complete the statements, which I don't know how that will happen. We'll see. There'll probably be a lot more regulations on that. But anyway, that's all I have for GASB. Yes, sir.
2 questions I have. Boring, like I said, I'm sorry. On this, with all these new effective dates, you know, as they started several years ago using 6/15 all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's put OMU in the city in implementation years. So when they go to consolidate the statements for the city's audit, do they footnote it?
Well, what we do is, you have the option to implement early, and since we do fold into the city audit, we always implement early, so we're on the same page as the city.
Okay, these GASB number 8, what is the requirements for component? Again, I guess I should have called them. Does it affect the way that then your audit's blended in with this, our audit's blended in with the cities?
Well, the city is government, so they follow the GASB.
So they
So
will
we're
have
okay.
to, they will have to follow this.
Oh, yeah.
Then, okay, one last thing, the fiduciary funds. Now, I know the city reports, because they have all along, the city and OMU old pension fund.
Right.
That we footnoted.
I believe that is footnoted
We
on
did
our-
last year.
Yeah. I
I think
believe
we
that is.
did.
I was just curious, I could look that up again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did last year. I'm pretty sure we did.
Yeah.
I appreciate the GASB update, sorry.
That concludes our work session, Mr. Chairman. Is there any other questions?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.